Hello guys, welcome back to the web service tutorial. So in the last tutorial, we saw WSDL is only there to act as an interface to let client know what to call and how to call and what are the input types and what are the output types, etc. Once client get hold of the WSDL file, it can extract or convert all these information from WSDL into a format client itself understands. That is like from XML to like Java or .NET or something, and then it make a request call to those web services from its code, which happens over the network by the way, and also get back response from network. So it goes something like this. So this we have a client. It calls methods. It discovers in WSDL file. So it requests those method with the help of file from its interface. Now server that request hits the server where the method are exposed in the form of web service. Now what happens? Web service again send back the response. It's as easy as it looks, but the only catch here is that again there's a problem of mode of communication. Client cannot directly call the server in any format. The client could be using some other format of communication while the server can be using some other format of communication. So this format also has to be the same. So in that case, what happened? The request call and the response call, which happens over network, must be also be the like language independent. It shouldn't matter what language the client or the server is using. So all request or response call from web service happens in XML format. So what happens? Client hits the server with the request in XML format, and it also gets back the response in XML format. Now it is the uh, responsibility of a mapper over this end and either ends to convert back the data from XML format to the format in which client or the server understand, and vice versa. So that is how it should happen. Now WSDL has a fixed XML format. That is how a WSDL can be created. It is always stays in a particular format because it is created by endpoint. We'll see what an endpoint is shortly. Similarly, even though request and response calls happen in XML, there could be difference in XML file converted from one language to another because of difference of data types and other semantics in them. So for a request or response XML files, there are format specified. Now that format was called SOAP. SOAP is the request and response format containing information passed between client and server. So if we have a client and we have a server, and client is trying to request something to the server, it will send that request in XML format. But even that XML format will have some standard, will have a particular format. That format will be called as SOAP. SOAP is a format in XML in which all request and response calls in web services are made. This way, there is always same interpretation at either ends. There's no miscommunication for that. So what is an UDDI? We have seen this in the first couple of slides, I guess. So UDDI, it is an XML based framework for integrating web services. It is like a directory or a yellow pages for web services. All the web services are kind of registered with the UDDI. Anyone who wants to access, or use this web service can query UDDI to get the requested web service from corresponding web service can be obtained. Now this is a very important section. This is endpoint. Now what is an endpoint? So what happens if you have your client code, you have that calculator functionality sitting residing with you in your system. Now what you want to create a WSDL out of it. But how do you do that? How do you create an XML format file from a Java interface? So now that part is done by an endpoint interface. So what happens with the help of endpoint, we can convert our interface, our web service annotated interface into a WSDL file, and we can access that WSDL file from a particular URL, and we can provide that URL to the client so that client can also access the same URL and they'll get the WSDL. And from the WSDL, the process, they can extract the functionality and then call our web services. So the endpoint is a URL where your services can be accessed by client application. This URL which I talked about, this is the endpoint, and we get it with the help of an endpoint object in Java. Now, the same web service can have multiple endpoints, for example, in order to make it available using different protocols. So we can have multiple endpoint or multiple URL to access the web services, the same web service. Now, I talked about the APIs in the starting, like JAS and stuff, and the web service. So there is a huge difference between these two. So it's kind of like a web service says is an API itself. Web services are wrapped inside API. What happens in web services, all of the communication happens over the internet, but with API this is not the case. API is like you are having a jar. You can import the jar directly and you can access that jar itself. There's no need of connection over network. It may or it may not. So basically web service is a subset of API. All the web services are APIs, but APIs are all of the APIs are not web services. Web service might not perform all operation that an API would perform also. And as I said, web service needs a network, always need a network, while API doesn't need a network for its operation. It may, it might not. It's not necessary, it doesn't need a network. Okay, so so we have reached to the end of the theoretical part, sorry. So there are certain things which we need to be clear upon before starting with the coding. So from the server or the publisher side, we will create a web service. This is our task. Creating a web service is one of our tasks. Then what we'll do after the web service is created with by annotation by using @web service, we will publish it. By publishing, I mean we will create a WSDL out of that web service, that web service interface with the help of endpoint interface. After that, WSDL is created. That WSDL resides on a particular URL called endpoint. Now WSDL can be accessed from the endpoint. How? We'll see it. So that is it. The server part is done. We have already created a WSDL. Now what we will do, we will give that WSDL URL or the endpoint to client. Now on the client side, what will happen? Client will generate language dependent interface from that WSDL and access those generated interfaces and hit them, and it will get a response. So this is pretty much what is going to happen when we do coding. So that is it, guys. We'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.